Right now, tonight, millions of people believe it already happened to them. Not in a movie, not in a dream. In their own bedroom, in their own bed, with the door locked. Some of them wake up with nosebleeds. Some wake up with hours missing from the clock. Some never talk about it again because they're scared of the look people give them when they try. So let's actually ask the question everyone's too embarrassed to ask seriously. What would really happen to you if aliens took you? Let's start with the moment it happens, because this part is almost always the same across thousands of reported cases. You're asleep. Then suddenly you're awake, but you can't move. Not your arms, not your legs, not even your voice. Your eyes are open and there's a shape standing at the foot of your bed. This is real, and it happens to roughly 7 to 8% of people at least once in their life. Doctors call it sleep paralysis, and it's one of the most terrifying things the human brain can do to itself because it traps full consciousness inside a body that refuses to cooperate. Here's the twist. Sleep paralysis happens when your brain wakes up before your body does. Normally, when you dream, your brain shuts off your muscles so you don't act out what's happening in your head. Punch a dream monster and your real arm stays still. But sometimes the wiring glitches. Your mind wakes up, your body stays locked, and your brain, panicking, starts filling in the blanks with whatever it's most afraid of. In medieval Europe, people saw witches sitting on their chest. In the 1950s, people saw demons. From the late 1960s onward, people started seeing gray aliens with big black eyes instead. Same experience, different century, different mask handed to your imagination by whatever your culture happened to be watching at the time. That shift traces back to a real couple, Betty and Barney Hill, a New Hampshire pair who reported 2 missing hours while driving home one night in 1961. Their story went public in 1965, then became a best-selling book, and through the 1970s and 80s, films and later Whitley Strieber's memoir, Communion, locked in the now familiar gray alien with the oversized black eyes as the default image. Every abduction story since has borrowed pieces of that template. The bright lights, the missing time, the cold metal table, almost like a script quietly passed down across generations. That's not proof the experience is fake, but it is a pattern, and patterns make scientists pay closer attention. So maybe the abduction already happened, just not the way you think. Your brain staged the whole thing, cast the actors, and dressed them in whatever costume the era supplied. But let's say it's real. Let's say something actually lands. What would it even want with you? Probably not much, honestly. You are made of roughly 60% water, a few dollars worth of carbon, calcium, and trace minerals, and absolutely nothing that couldn't be studied more efficiently from orbit with a decent scanner. A civilization advanced enough to cross interstellar space wouldn't need to strap you to a table with a flashlight. That's like flying to another continent just to poke one ant with a stick when you could watch the whole colony from a drone hovering 2 feet away. And here's a fun one. If they did want a physical sample, they wouldn't need you conscious, terrified, and narrating the experience for decades of therapy sessions afterward. A single skin cell contains your entire genetic blueprint. They could learn everything they needed from a coffee cup you left behind in a diner. The dramatic table and probe scene makes for great storytelling. It makes very little sense as actual field research. Then there's the distance problem, and this one's brutal. The nearest star system to us, Alpha Centauri, is about 424 light-years away. Voyager 1, humanity's fastest and farthest object, has been flying for almost 50 years and hasn't even left our own solar system's outer shell yet. At Voyager's speed, reaching Alpha Centauri would take roughly 73,000 years. So if aliens are showing up in backyards on a Tuesday night, they either broke physics as we understand it, or they've been watching us for an extremely long time and just decided this was finally the week to say hi. Let's talk odds for a second, because this is where things get weirdly hopeful and weirdly bleak at the same time. The Drake equation, first proposed by astronomer Frank Drake in 1961, tries to estimate how many communicating civilizations might exist in our galaxy right now, using factors like star formation rate, the chance of habitable planets, and the odds that intelligent life actually develops technology. Plug in optimistic numbers, and you get millions of civilizations. Plug in cautious ones, and you get roughly one. Us. Nobody agrees on the real answer, because we only have a sample size of one planet to work from. This gap even has a name, the Fermi paradox, after physicist Enrico Fermi, who supposedly looked around a lunch table in 1950 and asked a simple, devastating question. If the universe is so vast and so old, where is everybody? 75 years later, we still don't have a satisfying answer. And here's the part that always gets left out of the campfire version of these stories. If abductions were real, they'd almost certainly be boring in the most important ways. Reported cases rarely describe anything that looks like scientific curiosity about human culture, art, language, history, the things that would actually make us interesting to study. Instead, people describe repetitive physical exams, tissue samples, and vague, half-remembered instructions. That mismatch is exactly what you'd expect from a manufactured memory built out of fear. And 1950s science fiction, not from an actual first contact scenario run by a species that spent thousands of years learning to travel between stars. A truly advanced visitor would probably be far more interested in your language than your teeth. Now here's where it gets genuinely strange. If you were actually abducted, the science says your body would remember something even if your mind didn't. Trauma leaves fingerprints, elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep patterns for months afterward. Researchers who study self-described abductees, most famously psychologist John Mack at Harvard, found something odd. Their stress responses, their physiological readings during recall, looked almost identical to combat veterans describing real battle. Heart rate spikes, sweating, genuine panic. Whatever happened to them, their bodies believed it completely. That doesn't prove aliens. It proves the experience, real or not, left a mark. The same way a nightmare can leave you shaking long after you know it wasn't real. And missing time, the classic abduction detail, has a very human explanation too. It's called confabulation. Your brain hates gaps. If there's a blank space in your memory, your mind will quietly build a bridge to cover it, using fear, imagination, and whatever pop culture has already installed in your head since childhood. This is also why hypnosis, once used heavily to recover abduction memories, earned a bad reputation among psychologists. Studies through the 1990s showed hypnosis doesn't dig up buried truth. It makes people more confident in memories that were partly invented during the session itself. You're not lying when you say you saw a ship. Your brain genuinely believes it gave you the truth, confidently, in full color, with sound effects included. Let's talk about communication for a second, because this part's almost funny. If you got taken aboard a real alien craft, you probably couldn't tell them anything, and they probably couldn't tell you much either. Not because you're not smart enough, but because human language depends entirely on shared biology. We talk with air pushed through a throat shaped by millions of years of a very particular evolutionary path. A species that evolved on another planet might communicate through light, chemical signals, or vibrations we can't even sense. You could scream the entire alphabet at them, and it would land like static on an old television. There's also the small detail of surviving the trip in the first place. Space is not empty in the friendly, comfortable way movies suggest. It's a near-perfect vacuum, cold enough to freeze exposed skin almost instantly, and filled with radiation that would seriously damage unprotected human cells within a short window of exposure. Whatever ship supposedly carried you would need to solve problems human engineers haven't solved: radiation shielding, artificial gravity, propulsion faster than anything we've built. Which means if it happened, whoever built that ship has already casually cracked physics problems we're still stuck writing grant proposals about. So where does that leave you? Standing at the edge of two unfinished stories. One says, your brain, under stress, in the dark, alone, built a monster out of spare parts and gave it big black eyes because that's the image our culture handed it decades ago and never took back. The other says something out there noticed us a long time ago and hasn't said hello properly. Not because it can't, but because it's still deciding if we're worth the trip. Science can explain most of the abduction experience without ever needing a spaceship. The paralysis, the missing time, the physical fear response, the shape at the end of the bed. Most of it, but maybe not quite all of it. And that small gap is exactly why people still lie awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, half hoping nothing's there, half hoping something is. Because even after every explanation, every study, every skeptical scientist with a clipboard, there's still that one small stubborn feeling. The feeling that somewhere out past Alpha Centauri, something might already know your name.